As a society of supposedly civilized beings, how far are we willing to go to exert control over our youth? For Generation RX, the die has been cast, using an amalgam of high-tech marketing and tainted science. We owe it to our children, to ourselves, to ask tough, hard questions of medicine. Unless we do, the Greek tragedies will continue, day by day, drug by drug, until greater wisdom prevails.
"70 miles an hour, straight up the tower, 17 stories high, 3.5 Gs, powered by bungee cord, if you please."
We catapult our children into the world, tethered to us, yet separate, acutely aware that although we gave them life, they exist in their own sphere, just out of reach, flying in an orbit of their own making. It begins at birth, when they take their first breath. The cord is cut. And with that act, they're meant to soar through the milieu of life as sovereign individuals. We should cherish each moment, breathe in every act of this prolonged play, and hold on tight. As parents, of course, we're expected to impart our sage advice during their formative years. But increasingly, in this modern age of prescription drugs, mentoring has often taken a back seat to medicine. Doctor recommended and approved medicine. In the 1990s, the idyllic home life of the great American century was replaced by a new belief system, one represented by a few simple letters. The acronym was potent enough to spawn a new era in healthcare, and powerful enough to affect an entire generation of children. The letters were ADD, now called ADHD.
ADHD is a commonly diagnosed behavioral disorder of childhood that represents, and we want to stress this, a major public health problem.
Not long ago, we allowed our children to reach maturation on their own timetable. From the terrible twos through the terrible teens, we understood that their struggles were merely life personified. Today, children are not so fortunate. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has permeated their world, and an assortment of professionals have left no stone unturned in finding new enlistments among the schools of America. The question is, must they really be suffering from ADHD in order to be recruited?
Kids I know all over my community could easily, if they were in a particular school with a particular teacher, be labeled as hyperactive. I don't put a lot of credibility in the definition of hyperactivity. I know that some people would criticize me for this because they think it's all good science. It's really not. It's part of the commercial reality.
This commercial reality was brought about in 1970 when psychiatrists announced that children were suffering from a new disorder called minimal brain dysfunction. That year, 150,000 children were placed on Ritalin. Pandora's box was opened, and the drugging of children has grown exponentially ever since.
I can't fathom why people can't put this together. We have in our schools, grammar schools and high schools, these so-called drug-free zones, where you can't even ride on the street carrying any kind of drug. Yet inside the school, it's a cuckoo's nest. They're lining up to get drugs that do exactly the same things as methamphetamine that they disallow even in the perimeter of the school. Why society and why intelligent adults can't see the idiocy of what is going on in our school and the damage it's doing to the children, I don't understand.
Ritalin was first prescribed in the 50s for fatigue and depression, but it was also used widely with institutionalized mental patients. Sales slipped in the 1960s, but rose again from the ashes in the 1970s. This new market for Ritalin thrived, despite President Richard Nixon's war on drugs and Nancy Reagan's famous Just Say No campaign in the 1980s. Speed made its legal comeback in a big way in the 1990s, and the chemical cost was supported by tens of millions of dollars worth of advertising and merchandising. Thus, the very substance, damned as an affront to American values in the 70s and 80s, was pushed by doctors as a godsend for unruly children in the 90s. Ritalin production rose by 700%, even though the United States Drug Enforcement Administration persistently raised doubts about the safety and addictive qualities of the drug. This DEA document highlights the agency's concerns, including the six-fold increase in consumption of Ritalin from 1990 through 1994. The sobering report pointed out that the US produces and consumes 5 times more methylphenidate than the rest of the world combined. It also criticized drug maker Ciba-Geigy and industry-funded groups like CHAD as the powers likely behind the surge of Ritalin use. In 1998, the National Institutes of Health sponsored a 3-day ADHD conference and invited experts from around the world to participate. This rare video provides a disturbing glimpse of the event, one which the government does not want you to see.
We have agreed that there is no consistent diagnostic test for ADHD. Our knowledge about the cause or causes of ADHD remains speculative. I would now like to open the forum to questions from the press.
Joe Palca with National Public Radio. It sounds a little bit like you're saying that the definition is a little like the Supreme Court's definition of pornography, which is you know it when you see it.
No,
I'm concerned.
We're going to disagree, and okay. I would like any member of the panel to describe a typical ADHD in terms of symptomatology. Mark, would you like to? Since you see them in your practice.
I think the panel has been frank, and the difficulties here are immense in terms of these. It is hard. It's very hard to know how to answer this question. These kids, in my experience, when you see these kids, they are, several standard deviations different in terms of they cannot sit still, they cannot attend, they cannot, even when they are as if driven by a motive. There are some good clinical descriptions of these kids. I think
as pediatrician Mark Vonnegut struggles desperately to describe the symptoms of an ADHD child, it's fair to note that he must have diagnosed and treated hundreds of children for ADHD prior to this conference. But on this day at least, Dr. Vonnegut isn't clear at all about what identifying characteristics are present in an ADHD child.
I think the part of the problem is the profession keeps changing the diagnosis. We have DSM-4, the latest thing, but we have no guarantee that DSM-5 won't give us yet another diagnosis. But certainly, I think we have the feeling, again, that's not very satisfying, and I'm sure somebody else on this panel should have and could have done a better job than me with this question, so I'll stop talking now.
Anybody on the panel want to?
When the talking stopped, however, it became painfully evident that the esteemed proponents of ADHD were incapable of providing a cogent definition of this mysterious condition.
Okay, Brooke.
Brooke Reynolds, meanwhile, was among the first of her generation to be prescribed Ritalin. First given the drug at age 5, she was told by a neurologist that she suffered from attention deficit disorder. Like millions of other parents, the Reynolds family followed the advice of their doctor and gave their youngest daughter what became the first designer drug for a new era of children. They did so unaware of the growing public debate unaware that the DEA and others were voicing concern about the long-term safety of methylphenidate.
My son died as a result of Ritalin. How many deaths?